All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everyone, this is Tom Salemi, Editorial Director of DeviceTalks. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Before I'm joined by my podcast partner, Chris Newmarker, the Executive Editor of Life Sciences at Mass Device and Medical Design and Outsourcing, I want to let you know that I'll be hosting a webinar. It's not going to be a Device Talks Tuesday webinar. It's a different webinar with our friends at MCRA, and the title is The Future of Medical Devices: How COVID-19 and the Rise of Digital Health Has Changed Regulatory, Clinical, and Reimbursement Dynamics in the Medical Device Industry. That takes place at 11:30 a.m. You can find out more information at our medicaldesign.outsourcing.com website. Device Talks Tuesdays will return on June 30th. We'll be talking about improving MedTech's bedside manner with Heidi Dose. She's a senior program manager at Google, and she'll talk about her work to help MedTech companies and patients improve the performance of their implanted devices. It's a really fascinating conversation. She's an interesting person with a great background, so you want to be part of that conversation. Go to DeviceTalks.com to register for that. I hope you'll join us on both those webinars. Now it's time for this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. Let's join my podcast partner and co-host, Chris Newmarker. Well, Chris Newmarker, happy early Father's Day to you.
Yeah, thanks. You too, Tom.
It's going to be an odd Father's Day. Normally, I'd like to go to a minor league baseball game, but sadly, not possible. Any big plans this weekend?
Oh, hey, I got Five Guys the other day.
There you go.
That's a Father's Day-ish thing. That's a start, So yeah.
So let's get into this week. I mean, it's been I think an interesting week for MedTech. We've got a couple of great interviews lined up that we'll share on the podcast. But one thing I just wanted to kind of take a look back and take a look at our sort of more interesting or favorite stories of the week. Mine actually broke last Friday, but it was reported a lot this week. It was the Blackstone investment in Medtronic, which was kind of a unique royalty deal. Not something you see in MedTech very often.
That seemed really interesting to me too. And we have a number of emails out to device industry analysts now, kind of saying, "Hey, why did Medtronic take the money?" But as far as Blackstone's concerned, at least, diabetes is it's unfortunately a very stable space, because if you have diabetes, you need to check your blood sugar. You need your insulin, and there's been a lot of innovation in the space. Everything from continuous glucose monitors to automating insulin pumps. So there's a lot of really useful technology for people with diabetes that's coming out. Medtronic's done a lot of work in the space. So it's it makes sense. This would be a good way for Blackstone to hedge its bets for sure. That's that kind of technology.
All right, one of those analysts that Chris emailed actually did get back to us, and I was able to speak with Raj Denoy of Jefferies. Raj is actually our first return guest to the podcast. So let's hear this conversation I had with Raj about the Medtronic Blackstone deal. Well, Raj Denoy, welcome back to the podcast. You're our first repeat customer. Thanks for returning.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. Yeah, no problem.
So just looking for a little clarity on the Medtronic partnership or the investment Medtronic received from Blackstone. I mean, Blackstone's an interesting player. Obviously, it's a global private equity player. They acquired Claris last year, life sciences venture growth equity group. So they've got the expertise in this area, but we've never seen this sort of royalties-based deal in MedTech. I guess my question for you as a watcher of Medtronic, why would what would be appealing to Medtronic? What's in it for them other than the money?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think it's one that people have been asking, right? Because as you noted, it's a bit of a unique structure in medtech. Blackstone has done other deals in biotech and other areas where they put investments like this in, but certainly we haven't seen it in medtech before. And it kind of begs the question, because Medtronic being the largest pure play medical device company, a rock solid balance sheet, the fact that this company would be looking for external capital is somewhat surprising. They were asked about it recently on a public conference call, and they said, they've got an abundance of things that they can invest in as a company, and so this sort of expands their scope of investment. But it's still somewhat surprising. It's not a huge investment. $300 million for Medtronic is, over several years is not, backbreaking by any means for that company. So again, I think your question is a good one, and I'm not sure I can give you a great answer because it's somewhat interesting. I suppose you could also maybe couch it in the idea that the diabetes division, where this money is being put into, has struggled a little bit the last few years. They've been losing market share. They've been behind in product development. And so having Blackstone not only put money in, but also be involved in a steering committee in that division, might add a bit of discipline to it. And so maybe they're trying to signal something in that regard as well. But it's a unique structure. I'm not sure we'll see a lot of it because, again, the cost of capital for these companies is pretty low, and why they would limit the upside to them by paying a royalty to an outside party is kind of hard to explain.
That's an even more interesting element. The fact if they did just bring in some outside perspective to just to help them stay on track. So interesting thought. So you anticipated my next question was this. You don't necessarily see this as as an example others may follow. They certainly could. Blackstone has a lot of money to invest now, and they may make some deals that are too good to refuse. But based upon just what you see so far, you don't necessarily see a lot of other candidates for this happening down the road.
Sure, not in this vein, right? Where it's dedicated investment in a certain segment within a large kind of diversified med tech company. That's a relatively unique structure. I mean, if one of these companies was doing a large acquisition or needed, large sums of capital, maybe Blackstone or others could be a source of that. But structures like this, again, seem kind of one-off to me.
All right, excellent point. Well, thanks for taking a few minutes, Raj, and again, thanks for coming back to the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Talk to you soon.
All right, well, this week, the bulk of the podcast will focus on two themes that we've been covering a lot or talking about a lot lately. One of them is diversity, and we'll talk with Kevin Lobo of Stryker later on. I had a conversation with him earlier this week. And Kevin is, of course, the chair of AdvaMed, and last year at their annual meeting, they really emphasized their push into emphasizing diversity in medtech, and Kevin had a lot of interesting thoughts on that. So we'll share that interview toward the end of the podcast. But first, one thing that we can't seem to stop talking about is COVID-19. And you had a really great interview with Kevin Sayer of Dexcom about some success that they've had in introducing glucose monitoring in the treatment of COVID-19, or at least the monitoring of COVID-19.
Yeah, and the monitoring of the patients, and another sad thing in the diabetes space actually is that diabetes seems to be one of the factors that can cause somebody to have a severe case of COVID-19, and just one fact of life, if you have diabetes and you're in the hospital, generally in the past you have the staff is coming in all the time to check your blood sugar and help you manage your diabetes. If somebody has COVID, the staff in the hospital really want to have as little contact with you as possible, because they're trying to protect themselves. And that's kind of like where continuous glucose monitors come in. I mean, they haven't been really allowed in hospitals up until now, but the FDA kind of they issued like a temporary emergency guidance saying, yeah, bring the CGMs in the hospital. Dexcom's been doing it, Abbott's been doing it, and I asked Kevin Sayer, Dexcom's CEO, do you think this is gonna continue after the pandemic? Having your products in hospitals in this way, and let's just play the clip. I mean, here's what he had to say. Yeah, welcome to Mass Device Medical Design Outsourcing. It's really great to have you on. The first thing I'd really like to talk about is, the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, it remains on the top of mind for many people. How is the pandemic affecting Dexcom?
It's affected us in a number of ways. I think, first of all, if you look at our company's activities, we've really had a three-pronged focus that we've stuck to very carefully. First, our employees. And we very quickly, like a number of companies, migrated everybody who is not essential home and kept our factories up and running and producing. So we've not had any product shortage at all for our patients. We've been able to get them product as we could have pre-COVID, which is really a big win for us. So we focus first on our employees, next on all the patients that we serve, and then finally on the community. With respect to community, a couple of things we've done that have been really important, at least for Dexcom. One of them is about to launch. We have a patient assistance program that we put in place for Dexcom patients who in fact do lose their jobs during this time. We know that patients have come to completely depend upon this device for managing their diabetes.
Right.
And if they lose their insurance or their job, we put a program in place that will kick in, I think, early July, late June, to whereby for literally $90 for 6 months, these patients can still have access to CGM.
Yeah.
If they don't have Medicaid and they don't have their insurance anymore. So that is a big community commitment we made. The other thing we did is we, in speaking with a number of the hospitals and seeing what was going on, we were able to obtain an emergency waiver from the FDA to be able to use our system in the hospital on COVID patients. You know, as I've read all the data, and I'm probably more connected to the glucose data with respect to COVID than any of the rest of it, but a large number of the patients have diabetes, type 1 and type 2 diabetes, but there's also other patients who have other health challenges who have glucose variations that also lead to difficult COVID outcomes as well. Yeah. So our sensor has been able to be used in the hospital to give healthcare professionals the opportunity to remotely and accurately monitor these patients so they don't have to go in there and stick their finger every time something goes on. It saves time, it saves PP&E, it leads to better outcomes. You know, the diabetic patients got put on insulin drips. In many cases, they got off the insulin drip much faster because we could see, you know, the trends of their glucose values. And admissions were, you know, they were able to, not admissions, but discharges were much faster for those patients who were able to get on the Dexcom CGM as well. So we've been able to learn a lot about our product and made a big investment here to get the product into that hospital community so we'd have that kind of data.
That's neat.
So
kind of the preliminary data you have out, you know, like I know that was one of the big reveals that you had at ADA was this preliminary data, but it's showing that their you know, their discharge situation is better.
Yeah, it is better. And well, and you know, the anecdotal stories are even better than the stuff we can tell from the pulpit. You know, we've even heard stories of patients who come in and they were about to ventilate them, and then they realize, well, maybe the glucose values are out of control. Getting the glucose values under control leads to figuring out a whole bunch more about these patients before they take more drastic steps. So you know, it's been a good thing. We've learned where we need to improve a little bit. We've learned a lot of what we don't know with respect to how things work in the hospital environment, with respect to the IT connectivity and their security systems and how important security is there, whereas we're sending a mobile device in to communicate to the cloud. So we've learned from that. We've also learned what type of configuration would be the best configuration in that environment going forward in the future. Is something more configured to the entire nurse's station rather than the consumer configuration we have now. So I think over time, if we can capitalize on this and continue to gather data, this will position us very well to get into that segment in the future.
Yeah, that was kind of what my next question was going to be, was that, I mean, I know the FDA had this as like kind of like an emergency measure, but I mean, how much do you think this is going to, you know, stick would be a bad pun, but how long do you think this is going to, you know, stay around in the future?
Well, I can't speak to what the FDA will and won't grant us. I know from the hospitals we spoke with, they have no intention of giving it up, those who use it regularly, and they don't want to. So I'm as long as the COVID crisis looms, I think we can continue to gather data and continue to work on patients there. For us, next steps are to gather presentable data and get it to the FDA and show them the impact of the technology that we have, that our device performs the way that we thought it would in that environment, and go next steps from there. Inevitably, they'll decide with us, do we have to run another clinical study of some kind to get into the FDA? And if we do, we'll just do it. But we think that's an important market for us over time. We can have huge outcome there. Not just COVID-wise.
I'm definitely not an expert, but I could see like you could have some real efficiencies in a hospital environment.
Well, I mean, I went out and did a road trip on this, not this year, but a couple of years ago. And one medical center I went to, in the ICU, they test diabetes patients every 30 minutes.
Yeah.
48 finger sticks a day for these people. And you put a CGM on them, and those go away. That's a lot of nursing time. That's a lot of safety for patients with the alerts and the alarms. There's a lot of good things that happen because of that. So
yeah, that could be. I
think be a really nice market.
Yeah, and I mean what's going on with the pandemic is incredibly sad, but this does seem like a good example of how. I mean, you have a time of crisis, you can also have some real innovation. So, I mean, like hopefully this could be some good innovation in the healthcare system.
We hope so too.
I know in other news, so you're starting to ship out the G6 Pro next month. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, what makes it different compared with previous iterations of your CGM?
Sure, I'll be happy to. We have had a professional product for a long time, but we've never had something like this. The G6 system and the way it connects to the phone and the no calibration model of G6 is something different than we've ever offered the healthcare professional. So up until this point, there wasn't really if you went into the doctor's office and the professional offering we had was our old G4 system. So now with G6 Pro, if a physician wants to see how a patient's doing, that physician has a couple of options. One of those options is they can put a G6 Pro on them and they can blind it and literally use it as a checkup to see what's going on in a patient's life, and then download it after the sensor session and see the ups and the downs and what's going on. Or they can give that patient a real-time CGM experience, which is what Dexcom offers now, to whereby that patient can see the data on their phone and the data goes straight to the cloud to the physician, and they can talk during the course of a week. So as you look at a scenario, and again, let's go to the COVID situation here. If physicians had a G6 Pro type offering to put on a newly diagnosed patient, they could use that as a teaching opportunity for that patient to train them on how to manage their diabetes. There might have been an office visit to whereby they would have trained them to do it, but only one, and then they could walk them through that scenario through the telemedicine offerings that we provide now. We have a Clarity system. If that data is going to your phone, it goes straight to the cloud, and the physician can get that data, obviously securely and with the patient's permission. You can manage those newly diagnosed patients remotely rather than in a hospital or rather than in the office every day. And G6 Pro will give us an opportunity to do that without a patient having to go through all of what it takes to get reimbursed for a G6 system upon new diagnosis. So we think that provides us a great telehealth opportunity as well.
Yeah, you're kind of, tell me a little bit more about that, because it sounds like your technology is actually helping with, kind of like the growth of telehealth right now.
Oh, it absolutely is. When this started and the endocrinology clinics closed, physicians and the other caregivers in those clinics realized very quickly one of the easiest way to manage their patients is if they're on a Dexcom. And again, the way our system works, our on-body component, our sensor and transmitter, sends a glucose value to a receiving device, and for most of our patients, that's their mobile platform. If it goes to their mobile platform, then that data goes straight to the cloud, and with the permission of the patient, the physician can see that at any time they want through Clarity and see analysis. The other thing that happens on the telemedicine front with our product, and it's really not necessarily just telemedicine, but it's just the experience we've created for our patients, that data can be shared with a number of people. So again, you look at telehealth, the application for a physician, if they have a problem patient who's having difficulties, they could see that data real time if they wanted to, but also seeing that data real time are their caregivers and their infrastructure. If it's a child, their parents; if it's a married person, their spouse; or if it's one of our Medicare patients, it's their caregivers and those around them. So, we designed our system for this day many years ago, and it's very gratifying to see some of the things we plan for be useful in a time of crisis like this.
Yeah, it's kind of like maybe people had their older habits or their older way of like, treating the disease, and this has just kind of pushed everyone to kind of move in kind of what you were trying to encourage people to do, really.
Yeah, let's be more efficient about this.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's next? We got the G6. What's coming up?
For us with G6, this is like G6's second anniversary. It's been out for 2 years now.
Yeah.
And it's something we sometimes forget. That's not very long in a product life cycle in our industry. So we will continue to work on G6 and make it better. We've connected it to a number of devices. One of the takeaways from the ADA conference this past weekend, there were numerous presentations on G6 being connected to insulin pumps and algorithms to give patients, again, better experiences where they don't have to react so much to information. They have an algorithm and a system that treats them, and the results of those systems connected to our product were very promising. So we'll continue to connect to those products. We'll continue to refine it, I think. And then our next product offering is obviously our G7.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that for quite some time too. That's a much smaller product. It's again going to create a different experience. We will not give up any of the features of G6 that make it the best system on the market today, but we'll add to it and make that experience even better for patients. We've talked about that being delayed a bit due to the COVID situation because we haven't been able to run the studies we typically would run in a clinic and our studies are very detailed. You have to put a patient literally in a clinic and draw blood for an extended period of time, and clinics haven't been open doing that. And we're just starting back up on that front. So we'll continue to build on the G6 franchise. We have international markets where it hasn't been launched. We've got G6 Pro to launch. We've got devices to connect to. We've got software to build. And that's another exciting thing as you look at where Dexcom's positioned itself. This really is where technology meets healthcare. We can literally change the patient experience through different software applications. And I think as you look at over the course of the next several years, and now I'm getting pretty philosophical, but honest goodness, it's true. There are patients who are going to want to interact differently with their CGMs. And by having this ICGM designation we have to be able to connect with any device that's out there, pumps, pens, algorithms, what have you, because our data is so strong, we can create a number of different experiences for patients and that will engage them more and lead to better healthcare outcomes. So I literally think we're just at the beginning of the CGM revolution. I don't think this thing has really got all its legs yet. I think we're just starting.
That sounds great. Well, thanks. It was a real pleasure to meet you, and thanks for taking the time to talk today. And
it's a great day for us. And if you have any other questions, just let us know.
Well, great job with that interview, Chris. How did the article do on Mass Device this week?
And it's actually our most read article so far this week.
Excellent. Well, good job with that. Next, we're going to hear from Kevin Lobo. It was very, very kind of him to take a few minutes to talk. I had literally about 10 or 15 minutes with him earlier this week. And I wanted to speak with him because, of course, after the killing of George Floyd and all that came after that, I think we're all looking inward a bit as to what we can do better. And I think folks in medtech are asking that question as well, as they should, and as we should as content providers and conference producers. So it was great of Kevin to take a few minutes to talk about how he views the situation and the efforts they're taking, both at Stryker, but also at AdvaMed.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And, as you said, it is, other than COVID, this is like really the thing that's like top of mind for people right now.
So Kevin Lobo, thank you for joining us on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
So it's been a tumultuous couple of weeks, of course, since the killing of George Floyd, and this is an act that really has impacted the medtech community and the Minneapolis and Minnesota community, and it drew a lot of responses from medtech CEOs, very public statements that hadn't previously come. And I wanted to talk to you because I know when you took over as chair as AdvaMed, you made diversity, and I think AdvaMed was already moving this direction, but you made diversity a centerpiece of what you wanted to achieve in your 2 years. So I think this is sort of a great conversation to have. Following up on those statements by those CEOs, what can companies actually do from here? The public statements are great, but how do we turn that into meaningful action?
Yeah, I think the public statements were required. I mean, this is something that's been building. Our employees needed to hear that. And frankly, what's the next step is really to listen to our employees, to understand what they're going through in the very short term. We're in Stryker, we're calling it days of understanding. Mm-hmm. We're having our employee resource groups actually facilitate open conversations. So I think getting the dialogue alive and well among the company employees is really important. But from there, you then have to move to, okay, how do we advance the cause of diversity and inclusion? Something we've been doing at Stryker since I became CEO. And as you mentioned, AdvaMed, one of the 4 pillars that we established, a new pillar, was diversity and inclusion. We had activities going on, but it wasn't formal. We made it a formal committee with formal working groups, with formal sessions. Last year, we had a whole morning of our MedTech conference devoted to diversity and inclusion. And as a result, we had an increase of over 30% of female participants in the MedTech conference year over year. So pretty dramatic. And it was all around training for managers and employees about how do you become more diverse? How do you become more inclusive? Within Stryker, we actually measure our representation, female representation of racial diversity as well. Mm-hmm. And by measuring it, we haven't set goals, we haven't set targets, we don't do quotas, but we measure. And what gets measured actually results and translates into results. And what we've seen over the past 7 years is a steady increase in female and gender representation at the sales rep level, at the manager level, at the director level, and at the vice president level. In the vice president level, 8 percentage points just in the last 5 years. And for us, we noticed that sales for the medtech industry, if you look at gender versus other industries, we index lower on sales and executive management. In the middle management, we're pretty similar to other industries. Mm-hmm. Salesforce tends to be a funnel to executive management within our industry. So there's a zoom on that we've focused on at Stryker, and we're also focusing on in the medtech industry. As it relates to racial diversity, our numbers aren't as impressive at Stryker right now. We are tracking it. We're making, I would say, more slower progress, but that's because we've put most of our energy early on into gender diversity. That was the area we really wanted to focus on. We had a Stryker Women's ER employee resource group established, and it's been over 10 years old, and we just put that on steroids over the last 6 or 7 years. And now we have 7 other employee resource groups, including racial diversity. And we need to then bring those up to the same degree that we have with the Stryker Women's Network. But it all starts with having executive leadership, total commitment, a buy-in, metrics, measurement, discussions. And even at our sales meetings, our national sales meetings, we have breakouts to talk about diversity and inclusion. And those are extremely well attended. And so you really have to walk the talk in terms of having statements, but back them up with executive time at the employee resource group meetings, sponsorship, funding of your resource groups, and actual time where you spend discussing what sometimes are very contentious topics. Mm-hmm. People get very emotional. Their religion might lead them to have certain opinions about things. And so you have to air all of that and say, this is a workplace. We will not tolerate any kind of prejudice. We will not tolerate injustice. And you just have to be very clear about that. And employees embrace it. And so I found it to be very healthy. And it's caused us to have a broader population of people wanting to come to work at Stryker. And it's created a healthier environment for our employees.
So the tracking of the numbers, you say you don't have quotas, but you do keep track of the numbers.
We do.
How is that? What is the connection there? Is the fact that you're tracking the numbers, that you're letting your management teams know that, look, we are keeping an eye on this, we are following this, that's sufficient to ensure that they reach out and broaden their networks and bring in as many applicants and different types of new hires as possible?
I can certainly speak for Stryker. Numbers matter a lot at Stryker. Your quota, your business plan, people drive to hit their numbers. And by putting numbers on a page and asking people to explain They're either whether it's gone up, whether it's stayed the same, or whether it's gone down, why, and have them talk about it. That's enough. Just putting that in. And so when we do our business reviews, we actually we say, show us your numbers and talk about it and explain it to us. And what are you doing? And that's all we need at Stryker for people to really move the needle and to sort of find religion. And then we actually show them examples. So our medical division historically has had the best representation of women in their sales forces. And so we had the presidents of other divisions call the medical division and say, so what are you doing? How do you have so many more women? Or in the case of joint replacement. So a lot of times you hear the excuse that, well, most of the surgeons are men, so we're going to put a man in the operating room. And it's an excuse, because if you go to Australia or the UK, they have roughly 50% of their sales force are women servicing, and they're providing service and sales support to male surgeons for the most part. So it's just something that's happened in a society. Like if you look at Japan being more male dominant, or India for their sales forces, it's just something societal that's happened. And you can overcome that if you sort of take off your blinders and you're shown the example. And so we have our US people reach out to those countries and sort of explain to us how this has worked. And once you start and you bring in people that are different, and they're high talent, believe me, that's all you care about, is you want to drive great results. The customers are very happy. It's different at first. You have to have a little bit of courage to lean in these areas, but our results have proven that our business results have improved as we've become more diverse. And that's the most compelling factor for me.
So does the template then you use for gender diversity, is that the one you're going to carry over, if you haven't already, to broaden racial diversity?
Yes, exactly. So that's a more recent phenomenon. That what I was hoping would happen is, as you improve gender diversity, that would automatically have racial diversity improve. I just assumed that, once you start broadening your net, and you focus on women, that you'll bring along racial diversity. Well, it turned out not to be accurate. That racial diversity needs a separate lens, a separate focus. So unfortunately, I was hoping it would just create that tailwind. It didn't. And we do have some very specific actions that we have planned on racial diversity in terms of hiring and internships with historically black colleges, a whole series of programs. Now, coronavirus has obviously delayed some of the hiring initiatives, at least just short-term delay. But I think all of these incidents that have occurred has really shone a spotlight on this, and creating better dialogue within our organizations is helping, and really amplifying our employee resource groups, with like the same way we did for women's leadership, we're now doing with Black, Latinx, and different types of minorities, Asians as well. And we're really amplifying those resource groups. So I expect, because we are tracking, that we're going to start to see improvement, but we have a long way to go. We have not yet made that progress.
And you're looking at every level, from every level of management to manufacturing and such.
We track it at all levels. Honestly, in manufacturing, that's not an area of huge concern. We actually have pretty good diversity, both in women and racial diversity. The bigger areas of opportunity for us are in the sales force and also in management.
So zooming out then, back to your role as chair of AdvaMed, what will the industry do more on a broader basis? Do you see a Stryker model being applied by others? Is AdvaMed working on developing some sort of regimen that others can employ? Where do we go from here as a sector?
Yeah, I mean, we're not the only company that's been sort of embracing diversity and inclusion. So there are a lot of great companies within the medtech industry, and we want to take best practices from everybody. So some of the Stryker offense, I'm sure, has already been applied, but we're bringing in best practices from other organizations. And what I'm excited about is all of the CEOs really embrace this. So when I suggested that we'd launch this, I wasn't sure what the reaction would be. In my mind, I thought some companies might say, well, this is not a job of a trade association. This is, each of our companies should focus on this. But I'm overwhelmed with support from all the other medtech CEOs that they wanted to focus on this. They want to raise the industry attractiveness for diverse candidates to come into our industry and to thrive in their careers. So that's been really exciting. And so we are tracking our metrics. We had this workshop at the last MedTech conference, something we haven't really done at Stryker. We are looking at doing different types of training. We have a training at Stryker called Think Twice, which is really terrific. It's going very, very well around unconscious bias. And you've probably heard in the literature that unconscious bias training has had mixed results in companies. The way our Think Twice works is we say, you're not responsible for your first thought, but you are responsible for your second thought and your first action. So in other words, you're biased. Everyone's biased. Don't worry about it. So when you have that first reaction of, well, that person wouldn't fit in our company, stop, think twice, and say, right, why not? And challenge yourself. And so rather than saying we're going to change your bias, which some of the trainings have done, try to change you can't change your natural bias of what has been in your body and in your mind since you were born, right? You're a subject of your environment to some degree. But if you can stop yourself and pause and learn about why you might have a bias, then you can actually change in terms of hiring and having diverse panels and interview panels, diverse slates, all of these kind of practices. We're trying to now proliferate that across our industry. And we even have some employee resource groups that are broader than just one company, like MedTech Color, which was a grassroots organization, and AdvaMed is partnering with these groups to really amplify their voice. So it's really, it's not sort of the Stryker offense taken to AdvaMed. It's getting best practice from all of the different companies, including Stryker. But I'd say I'm pretty excited. It's gained more steam than I expected prior to the racial unrest that we've just had in the United States. And this is only going to make it go that much faster.
Excellent. And I appreciate your taking time for this important conversation. Just one quick question. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. You mentioned COVID-19. How is Stryker moving forward from this?
So we have quite a bit of exposure to elective procedure, or what I like to say deferrable procedures, because people still will need their hip or knee replacement or their spinal procedure, but it's been delayed. And so April was our worst month. Our sales were down almost 40%. May was better than April. June is tracking better than May. So as the economies open up, the business is starting to return, which is very exciting. We did idle a number of our production lines. We're looking to bring those production lines back on in the month of July. So we're gearing up for a return to work, which is, of course, very exciting. And we've learned new skills like we're doing today on this call. You do this for a living, but at Stryker, we didn't do so much of physician training or even just meetings in this virtual format. And I think this will be part of our future offense. But we're feeling very optimistic about the future. We came into this in a position of strength. We had grown organically 7 consecutive years. We had a great start to the year. Obviously, this has derailed our growth momentum for a little while, but we believe we're going to be able to bounce back and have a terrific future ahead of us.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time and thank you for your leadership.
Okay, thank you.
Well, there you go. Thanks again to Kevin Lobo for taking a few minutes for that interview. I thought it went really well and had some very important messages.
Yeah, I mean, besides some really good insights there about diversity in the industry, that was interesting too. That he's starting to see some signs of recovery for Stryker, which it kind of goes along with what we're hearing from a lot of the other top executives as they do analyst calls and whatnot. So let's hope that continues.
So excellent. Well, this concludes this episode of the DeviceTalks Weekly podcast. Chris, how can folks find you on social media?
It's really easy. You can find me on Twitter @newmarker, just like a new marker. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can reach me at cnewmarker@wtwhmedia.com. Always happy to chat with people.
Awesome. And I am on Twitter @MedTechTom, on LinkedIn under Tom Salemi. Please connect with me. And email is the same, tsalemi@wtwhmedia.com. Please, folks, if you would subscribe to this podcast, that'd be great. That way we can send it directly to you. You'll get it before anyone else. I promise you'll be the first one we send it to. And give a rating, too, if you would, on Apple Podcasts. It's great to hear how we're doing and to see how we're doing, and it'll help other people find the podcast. And you can also share this on social media. We gave you all our social media info. Put it out there on Twitter and LinkedIn. Connect to Chris and myself. We'd love to be part of that conversation. Finally, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Hope it's an enjoyable, quiet holiday weekend. And tune in next week. We'll have another great episode of DeviceTalks Weekly waiting for you.
Grill something out. Stay safe and healthy.